Welcome to the Healthcare Nation podcast. Your host, Rick Janata, here with our producer, Joe Woolworth. Joe,
Hello.
I'm still on the road, man, and it's looking forward to getting back into the studio, though. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to you getting back as well.
Well, listen, it's been a little reprieve in the weather. I'm down in South Florida, and when it rains, it cools things off, so that's okay. I don't mind that. But the water temperature is still way up there. We're going to have to do a segment on that.
The reports we're hearing here in North Carolina about how the hurricane season can be because of the temperature of the water is a little bit iffy.
Talking about, changes and things over time. Our guest today, Ed Marx, who I've known for a few years now, many years now, actually. One of the pioneers in one of the areas that has changed so much, and that is really IT services. Ed is the youngest child of Holocaust survivors, right? He came to the United States at age 10. When he was 16, he had his first job in healthcare as a clinic janitor, where he really did discover his passion in calling for healthcare. That was followed up with some education and then a long-standing stint in the Army as a combat medic. He was trained as a combat medic, which really positioned him into further leadership roles, ultimately at Cleveland Clinic and New York City Health and Hospitals, where I served with Ed, Texas Health Resources. And he really has crafted his career not only in the data space, but what I've seen now, this evolution in leadership and innovation, which has just been fantastic to watch as a friend. He's now started Marx Advisory Services, where he has a great consulting practice and is a prolific writer. I have been involved with him on his book, Voices of Innovation. Second edition is out. Lots of insights there. So when we think about changes over time, this is someone who's got, I think, their finger on the pulse of that in perspective. So with that, Joe, let's welcome Ed Marx. Welcome to the Healthcare Nation podcast. I'm your host, Rick Janata, and we're committed to bringing you thought leaders in the field to discuss what's new and noteworthy in the health sector. This is the Healthcare Nation podcast. Ed, how are you doing, my friend?
Rick, I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Great to see you. Of course, Ed and I worked together for a short bit in New York City, which I think, bonded over some great shared challenges there. And with that said, Ed, I'm going to jump right in and just talk about some of the, I guess, starting in the beginning, your humble, really journey that you've had and transformation across your entire career, where it started. Can you give us a little bit about some of the background and the informative parts of your journey? I know you started out really as a janitor and then found your passion as you worked up in healthcare. So share with me and the audience how that all started.
Yeah, it was rather innocently. I had no idea, like any other kid, didn't really know what I was going to do when I grew up and those sorts of things. But I found myself with this great job working as a janitor at a healthcare facility. So some of my teenage high school buddies, they already worked there, and they're like, "Hey, there's a spot open. Do you want to do it?" It was a perfect job because the clinic part was closed at 4:30 p.m. And so as long as you got your work done anytime before 7 a.m. the next morning, it was cool. So we would just show up whenever, so it really accommodated our lifestyle in terms of, sports and things like that. So I would be there cleaning, mopping, sweeping, taking out the trash, and I would be listening to my Sony Walkman, if you remember those things. And
of course,
probably listen to Sabbath or, AC/DC before I got onto some U2. And when I was working, I just felt this sense like, wow, I want to serve in healthcare. And so it's nothing that I could articulate, like I had this vision or this Damascus Road experience, but I just knew that it was healthcare. So anything I could do to go down the healthcare path, I was super interested in. So when I was looking to go to the university, I didn't have any money and my grades weren't that great. So I wasn't getting a scholarship. So I joined the Army Reserve because they offered, a stipend for me to go study. So they said, you could be anything you want. So one of the choices was combat medic. So I was like, of course it's combat medic. And again, that just like stoked the fires even further. And that's really how it all started. I could go further, Rick, but I mean, that's how I got going into this healthcare path.
And I always think about this, and it's thematic. I think I could speak for myself in my own life, but also the guests we've had on. When you have a fire, that passion, and you connect it to a great purpose, you just spin off great meaning in your life and in others. And it sounds like that's where it all started for you and continues today. Am I onto something there?
Yeah, for sure. Because, what happened next, again, I took on subsequent roles. I tried to work in healthcare, and finally I landed a role in physician relations. And in physician relations, I was part of the strategy office, and I had good relationships with the docs. And so the IT department, and I know IT has changed quite a bit since these days, but they didn't communicate real well with the physicians and, the customers. And so they said, Ed, you've got these great relationships with the docs. Help us to get better utilization out of this incredible technology they had back then. Again, this is going back to the 90s where it was dial-up modem type situation. And so they had this system where you could dial in and look at records. And so you could be at home. You don't have to be at the facility. So they only had like 5% adoption. So they said, Ed, help us out. I helped them. We got to 95% adoption, just doing basic marketing and communication things. And so that was pretty cool. And then the birth of our first daughter. So we already had a son and we were ready for kid number 2. And our daughter was born. It was super traumatic experience. I won't go into the detail to save some time, but it was super traumatic. She was born without life. They were afraid she was dead. Then they resuscitated her. She had 3 life-threatening issues. But we were like a level 3 nursery NICU. And so the level 1 is a couple hours away down in Denver. And they're like, we can life flight her, but it has a lot of risk. My wife was also hospitalized because of all the trauma to her body. So it was like, man, what do we do? And then it realized, wait a second, we've got this great capability, right? That I just talked about where physicians could modem in. So yeah, it was a long distance charge back in the day, but we sent down one of the engineers to Denver Children's. They worked with the people there. They set up this ability for those doctors to dial in real time to the medical record, pick up the phone and talk to, so these neonatologists in Denver Children's would talk to our docs in Fort Collins, Colorado, and our daughter's life was saved. So she had this miraculous recovery, except for when she was a teenager, she went through this goth phase, but that only lasted about a year. But other than that, she graduated college at age 18 and she's been serving in healthcare since the day she graduated college at age 18. So it's been about 10 years now. And so that's what, at that moment, Rick, I was like, oh my gosh, the intersection of tech, clinical, strategy, that's how you save lives. And so that's been my mantra ever since. And so every role that I've ever taken, it's all about, at the end of the day, how do we leverage those things to save people's lives?
I love that. What a story, what a blessing too out of it. And by the way, I could see where your daughter got her spunk. You got your Jimi Hendrix shirt on. So we love that. And by the way, not a far jump from goth. But listen, thinking about this, that convergence, personal experience, what went into that, highly charged, obviously emotional time in your life, but then tying in the clinical environment, the business operations, this digital mindset that you had at that point, the convergence of all those elements together, which really informed this part of, I think, is your philosophy. Elaborate on that a little bit. And how do you see that evolving in the future? Clearly, you had some high points there, getting buy-in from the stakeholders, the physicians, the clinicians, but also the timing of technology and the convergence of those factors. Unpack that a bit more for us, Ed.
Yeah, I think traditionally, you're right, Rick, and you have great point of view on all this, as a leader and the things that you've done and leading health systems and hospitals and all that sort of thing. But the way it's been done traditionally is like you had tech and they were sort of off in the corner in their own silo, and you had clinicians doing their thing, and it even happens today. So there is a lot of changes that have happened since then, but a lot of times you have all these different disparate silos. And frankly, that may be one reason that I think we're a little stuck in healthcare, is because we haven't really collegially collaborated the way that we all know we should. And even in modern organizations, I won't pick on any, I'm not going to say any names, but I've worked in some pretty modern organizations. And even there, we still had a lot of friction going on between the silos, where it would have been best for all of us to serve together with that common mission and vision, of world-class care, highest quality care, those sorts of things, patient experience. And so, but I think it's changing, and there's more, thanks to your podcast and other leaders, I think things are changing where we're learning that, hey, if you really want to succeed, if you really want to transform healthcare, you've got to get rid of walls. You got to get rid of borders and just work together. I used to tell, I remember I was frustrated one time at a health system. I was like, man, let's stop building bricks of walls. Let's build bricks of bridges. and like work together, because at the end of the day, it's the patient, right? And also the clinician that we need to serve. So so that's sort of how it's come together for me. And I do see changes in healthcare, but I think that's one reason we haven't transformed quickly enough.
Yeah, the silos you talked about, one of the, I would say, biggest gaps early on was where IT was seen as just a separate shop. And today, I think more and more we're seeing information technology, data, and clearly everything that's going into AI, ML, natural language processing, that's really about innovation.
Yeah.
And share with us, your thoughts on making that jump from IT, where it was very data oriented, to now where I really think it's much more in the innovative space within not only health systems, but obviously big enterprises.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you need to do, and it all starts with culture, So what I've always done, every health system that I served at for about 15 years, I did it across 3 different health systems, where I made all of the IT employees serve 1 day a year in a healthcare setting, meaning they had to sign up and work at a hospital, and they could choose. So the hospitals and the presidents were great. They could choose, an OR, they could choose a lab, they could choose shadowing a nurse, but they spent an entire day every year. And you think, oh, what difference is that going to make? Well, I'll give you a couple quick examples. And sorry, so Rick, I'm sort of starting way back here on culture, but I'll come up quickly to answer the heart of your question. But it does start with this culture. So 2 quick examples, what I would make people do after they had this experience is we had like a Slack channel, and people would write what their experience was. That's all they had to do. Like, go sign up, go do it, and then write a little bit about it. And I'll remember this database administrator. He said, and I've been an employee of, this was at Texas Health. I've been an employee at Texas Health Resources for 25 years. And I thought this was the dumbest idea ever, because we're so far behind. We have a backlog of things we need to do. And now I had to give up an entire day. But after this experience, I never knew we had patients. So clearly he knew in his head we had patients,
Right.
but he didn't know in his heart. And he then became the best damn database administrator we ever had, because he finally got it. And that's part of the leader, is to make sure that you transfer this head knowledge to heart knowledge. And then one quick other example was my administrative assistant. Now remember, this is 1 day a year, but over years it gets multiplied. So for her, this happened 6 times. So she couldn't have a child herself. So she always picked OB at our main hospital in Fort Worth, Texas. And every time she got assigned, there was a single mom having a baby. And she bonded with these moms to the point that they invited her in when they were giving birth. Sometimes it was a C-section, sometimes it was a natural birth. And she became part of that. And so when you asked her, hey, what do you do at Texas Health? She would say, I deliver babies. So you hit the heart of people and it changes. So then when you start bringing in innovation, so that it also leads to innovation, because I also had all this feedback that people would say, I didn't realize that nurses had to walk 8 miles a day. This person would say, they wrote, I'm a marathoner. I thought I was in really good shape until I spent a day shadowing a nurse. So he figured out, hey, how can we redesign so that, like, this was back in a little bit more paper intensive days, but to where it was easier to get whatever report they had to get that was a printout. So they didn't have to walk a half a mile and those sorts of things. So it really spurred on innovation. Or then from a more tech example, it's like, wow, how do we automate, these interfaces so that there's less opportunity for medical error, transcription error, and it makes the life easier for that clinician if everything is automated. So this innovation started happening, and we became known for, sort of innovation. And so it only happens though. So to the heart of your question, sorry, it took a long time to get there, Rick, but
no, I love it. I love it.
Clinicians hang out with IT. IT hangs out with clinicians. So again, I've done this my entire career. And even at the Cleveland Clinic, I took it a step further. So we did the same program, but the leadership team had to do this monthly. And so I took 1 day a week. I worked in the OR. So I went back to my anesthesia skills, which I left out earlier in the story, but I had some anesthesia experience. early on. And so I became part of the medical staff. And so one day a week, I worked in assisted anesthesiologist in caring for patients. And so my eyes were open. So even as a tenured CIO who's been part of some great organizations, doing great things, I saw firsthand. I was like, oh my gosh, in the OR, there's still not this interoperability. That's shocked me actually, that a lot of this biotech equipment wasn't interfaced with these other clinical systems. So literally there was manual stuff going on. I was like, wait a second, this is the modern era. We cannot be doing it. And then I had new ideas. And it's not just me. You multiply this by many people that served with me. Like another idea was, safety and quality in the OR. It's like, why can't we do all this voice enabled? Why can't we do ambient voice, which has turned out now ambient voice? And it's like, what, instead of all these manual checklists, checklist manifesto was great, but if you could automate that, that's even better. So that's what we started doing. So that's how you get to the innovation. And then you celebrate failure. That's one other thing. So Rick, one last story, because it's a good one, celebrating failure. So there was some new technology that came out. It was called Surface, but it wasn't, the Surface that we know today. And so we did this innovation. It was like a coffee table. It came from Microsoft. So it was like a coffee table sized device or a computing device. And it was really cool, but it failed miserably because the iPad came out. And so it's like, iPad's mobile. This device is not mobile. So what we did is we used it as a coffee table. So when you came to visit us, you would see a coffee table and you'd be like, what's that? And it was this old device where we had a failure, but we learned from it. From that, we took all the learnings from that, applied it to the iPad, and we came out with one of the first apps in healthcare. This was, many years ago. So that's an example of innovation, the culture, how you do it, celebrate failure. So that's been my style.
Yeah. And I just got to feedback a couple things on that. First, working backwards, the coffee table, it was also a reminder. It was almost like a totem, right? I mean, that kept everyone focused. So I think celebrating, even if it was something that was, say, born out of failure, that innovative piece, that dedication to moving forward, to keep it front and center, hats off to you to make that happen. But the real inspiring piece is when you're connecting individuals who, although they're part of something, they don't understand their place in the greater good, and giving them the experiences that you described. I think, and I've done some of that in my own career, it is so absolutely compelling and indeed emotional, and it's life-changing for folks because they can actually see the impact factor they're having, even if they may be working in the business office and they don't know what goes on at the bedside or in the boardroom, and they don't know what's happening, in the blood bank. It's very, very powerful. So I really commend you on that. And staying on the theme of innovation, and I want to jump to this, the book, Voices of Innovation, right? Second edition right now. You've highlighted, obviously, in our conversations, just the importance of innovation in healthcare, but the insights, the folks you brought together to create this ongoing discussion, narrative, source of just, I think, vital information is also compelling. So talk to us a little bit about what's happening with the book and where it's at right now.
Yeah. So little cameo with the book right here for those who can have a visual. So the book came out July 2023, second edition. Thank you, Rick, for being part of both the first edition and second edition. All the profits from authors such as ourselves go to cure cancer. In this case, Mary Crowley Cancer Research, a phase 1 clinical trial center. So it's great. Not only does it add a lot of structure for people trying to innovate, but it's for a good purpose. Yeah. So the way the book is organized is around a structure of innovation. So there's a framework for innovation. You can pick any framework. Go to Google and framework innovation. You'll find good ones. So we're not trying to say ours is the best. It's an average one. It came from out of HIMSS. It's fine. It works. But in the book, instead of me talking about innovation, some cool things that my teams have done, it's really people like Rick, like yourselves, who are in it deep and doing some great things and sharing their stories around the framework. So it's full of like 35, 40 examples from around the world of people doing great innovation. And I think one of the highlights that comes out of a few of them is what I would call scrappy innovation. So sometimes, Rick, as you know, we think innovation, like the CEO, like yourself, would say, Hey, we need to be more innovative. We need to do something innovation. And people understand it intellectually, but then like from a practical standpoint, it's like, what does that mean? How to do it? Or you might say, oh, that's for the academic medical centers. That's for UCI or that's for Cleveland Clinic. And indeed, those sort of organizations are sort of built for innovation for a wide variety of reasons. But what about that 90 other percent? So you can do it. And one way is the scrappy innovation concept. So these are organizations, small hospitals, sometimes bigger hospitals, sometimes hospitals, in one case, a public health hospital, like out of Cleveland. And they were doing amazing, innovative stuff, but scrappy. That means they didn't have a chief innovation officer. They didn't have an office of innovation. They didn't have a marketing thing that took your innovations and went to the marketplace. They didn't have any of that. But what they had were people like, they're like most of your listeners or all your listeners that are sincere, devout, like what we can do to improve healthcare. And they just figured things out. And it didn't have to be expensive. They didn't have to hire developers. They just made things happen. And I just call it scrappy innovation, low cost, sometimes no cost, sometimes very little time. But it's like people across borders, like we were talking about earlier, who had the mission and vision in sight and were able to come together and do some great things.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I love being part of it. I love reading it. The second edition, equally as good as the first. Must read. So again, I really thank you for the opportunity, but I think so many folks thank you for giving them that chance to also compile and curate these vignettes on innovation and innovative processes, which you can't find anywhere else. So really, really cool. I mean, that's one thing I'd say. Listen, getting back to the practical and tactical, and I would be remiss if I didn't, go to one area of your content expertise on the innovation, on the technology side and what's happening in the world of data. We hear so much about artificial intelligence and everything that's coming out of ChatGPT and ML and whole bit. I almost don't want to read another, piece on it, but I have to, because I don't think it's going away. And I think it's going to inform a lot of what we do in healthcare. I wanted to get your take on that. And I also wanted to kind of query your mind here. Where is this going? What's it going to look like in 3 to 5 years? And what kind of investment should health systems, enterprises, and the health sector, and I'm including like pharma, medtech, bio, make in these, incredibly, I think, game-changing developments?
Yeah, I'm super excited about it because I think it hits a lot of the pain points that we've had in healthcare. We have to be careful not to think that it's the end all be all, because we get so excited. Like, remember blockchain, and what's happened with that. Although there's some good stories for blockchain, but it wasn't the cure of all of our ills. Gen AI and such, I think, have a lot more benefit to offer and will be around, and we need to embrace them. And we need to be careful how we do it. I know there's a lot of thoughtful people and organizations getting together now to make sure that what we develop is ultimately safe and helpful and doesn't sort of backfire on us. So I think that's important. But I think, it will bring a lot of great changes for us that'll improve experience for clinicians and patients, and will do a lot to improve workflow. And, the best example, and I sort of touched on it when I was given the OR one, but if you think about a typical physician-patient interaction, and I've talked about this for many years, and it's cool that it's actually happening. So this is where, it's a deviceless interaction. It's just chat. And of course, with ambient voice working in the background. But the next step is I think the physician will have an earpiece of some sort, or the clinician, that is giving them what's the next best question. So, there's no way to keep up with all the data. We know all that, all the research. And then there's no way to, be able to triangulate these complex potential impacts of DNA and what were your previous, results, and what's your family history results, all those sort of things. There's no way a clinician is going to be thinking real time, all these different vectors, but the compute power now that we have can do it, and the Gen AI. And so maybe the clinician gets the next best question that he or she would have never thought about before, because now it's taking in their genetics, or it's going back in their family tree a couple generations, and all sorts of things. And so I think it's going to make the clinician experience better, definitely the patient experience back and forth. So that's an example on the clinical side. And obviously, I think we're going to evolve to much higher rates of success with, what we're doing in imaging. So you've seen a lot of the imaging studies and they've been vastly improving all the time with AI but what's the ideal physician AI sort of algorithm, when they are involved, when they're not to be involved, that sort of thing. So we've seen some really good progress. We all know because it was not surprising, but it's been a little fun to see the AI responding to emails, right? And compared to clinicians, and the AI was found to be much more empathetic, et cetera. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I think we'll be using AI to automate a lot of things today that are manually done. I know of other examples of practices around the country that are leveraging AI and having a better impact. So one quick example is like with patients where a patient, it's still only about 50%, and that might be high, of patients who really want to use your portal.
Mhm.
I'm a big portal person. I believe in it. I'm sort of techie person, and I love the portal and but not everyone is like that. And it can be complicated for some people, but what they can do pretty easy is get a text and they link to this text and then they're in a site where they do fill out the form that they're not going to go on the portal to fill out. And so so once they get there, it streamlines their experience and things like that. It's funny, Rick, that a lot of times that some of the systems that are more advanced with technology, they still rely on a clipboard. So I had that happen recently. Like I do all that because because I want to do it. I want to help them. So I fill out all the forms ahead of time. They know I'm there. They have the automated check-in, the Wi-Fi, and they still hand me a clipboard. It's just so funny. But this going back to scrappy innovation, this example that I'm thinking about, they do scrappy. That's an example of scrappy innovation. They have over 95% compliance that people respond, no matter what age group demographic, they respond to their text message, they fill in the thing, and it's all digital. And so they've saved a tons of money at the clinic. The clinicians are much more productive and the patients are happier. It's just amazing. So I think that's where we're headed. So you have to embrace AI. And I could go into supply chain too. I think there's a great opportunity on the supply chain side to really pull out a ton of cost. But those are some examples where I think we're headed in the next 3 to 5 years. It is just sort of that fully automated experience that's helping the clinician, that's helping the patient, the family, and helping the organization become more efficient.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that there's incredible promise when you look at the scientific application, what it would do for clinical medicine, even for surgery, just absolutely enormous. But there's like 30% of an opportunity right now on the administrative side, what you talked about from clipboard or breaking down the barriers that are so inefficient that could, extract a lot of wasted time and expense that was unnecessary that could really bend the curve, not only on cost, but also on satisfaction. So I'm hoping and I'm still bullish that that's going to be some of the areas that folks are working on right now. Ed, let me shift real quick and maybe we'll thematically stay on this. So Marx Advisory, I'm very excited about this. You've like me, you've had a longstanding career, heavy duty impact factor, not done yet, but you're pivoting and really helping, I think, healthcare companies, health systems, and get them to another level by leveraging your content expertise. Tell us a little bit more about what you're doing, what the focus is and your approach.
Yeah, I'm super excited about Marx Advisory. Obviously, it's because it's my business, but I did make a major pivot. Actually, 4 or 5 years ago when I left the clinic, I went to launch my own advisory firm, and I did. But my biggest client at the time, 2 months in, they're like, "Ed, we just want you to work for us full time." And frankly, the security of working for a big global client, and then I had a global position, which would be the first time as the chief digital officer for Tech Mahindra Health and Life Sciences. So I was like, wow, that, okay, I'll put away sort of in the back burner my little business and I'll do this thing with Tech M. Then I had a chance to be a CEO of a consulting firm. And I thought, oh, that would give me some great experience too. But after a year, after I did Tech Mahindra for a few years, and then after I did my work as a CEO of a consulting firm, I decided, I think it's time to now sort of relaunch, just bring that back and relaunch Marx Advisory and have the firm that I was the CEO at, they became my anchor client. So it's kind of flipped the script. So I had an immediate client and to build on. And so, yeah, I've been going for about 3 months now. So we're really about three things. One is just retained advisory. So rather than like an hourly person or something like that, fractional, I just do retained advisory. You can call me up anytime, day or night, and I will be there and I will help you. And so I'm helping several companies, and I'm purposely keeping it small. So I have a handful of companies that I can give undivided attention to. And so I help them for everything from figuring out go-to-market strategy, branding, the marketing, overall strategy, and then how to better connect with the C-suite. So the problem with many vendors is they don't know how to connect with the C-suite. And when they do, it's a disaster. They bring in, 10, Rick, you had this have deals. You say, okay, to a meeting, 10 people show up, and then suddenly they're showing you 50 slides, and it's just wrong. It doesn't work. We're sending all these phishing emails, it just doesn't work. And so I'm giving them a lot of new avenues on how to really make it work that benefits also the C-suite, because they're tired of all that stuff as well. So they're happy about the work I'm doing. And then I'm doing a lot of speaking. I've done a lot of speaking in the past, but this platform enables me to do quite a bit more speaking. And that's really fun. I love to do it. And then I'm serving on boards. So I'm on a couple of health system boards, and that is really eye-opening. And then on a board, helping out some startups and things like that. So that's Marx Advisory. And yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Well, looking to hear so much more from you as it evolves over time. Look, I love to wrap up our segments with this question. It particularly for those who've had impactful careers that were undoubtedly full of a lot of pressure and a lot of promise as well. But the personal life, the work-life balance. I know you've been married for a long time. You love dancing, mountain climbing. You're very active. Clearly, as a father, sharing your experiences there. How do you balance things out? Where do you keep that fire that you clearly have and that passion you have for life going and balanced?
Yeah. So I don't, first of all, I have to say, I don't have it all figured out. We're learning all the time, and it's certainly not perfect, but we've done a few things right. And we actually wrote a book about it, and we haven't released it yet because it's a little edgy, and maybe too edgy, now that I have Marx Advisory. So we're working on how do we make it a little bit less edgy. And we're coming out with this thing called Dr. and Mr. Marx. So my wife's a D&P. She has her own practice, like a med spa. And so, but we're making life work. We have 5 kids, 4 grandchildren. All of our kids are like good people. That's the most important. But they also happen to be super successful in their particular professions. And so, and we do work hard on keeping that passion going between us and with our kids. And so we wrote this book. But yeah, how do we do it? One is, the marital relationship always comes first before the kids. So no question about it. I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up. So that's one thing we do. And so we work on that. So we have regular dates, and I still send my wife flowers a couple times a month, and some other things that are in the book. And we go dancing. And so that's something we both love. And we can get lazy too. Like, oh my gosh, it's Saturday, like 6 p.m. Do we really want to go out at 9 or 10 p.m. to dance? And so whenever we find ourselves getting lazy, we're like, yeah, we're definitely going, because we don't want to get in that trap. So we do things. And then we found shared love together. So dancing is one, climbing, hiking, mountains is another, travel is another. So we found these shared things. My wife is definitely way more into dancing than I was, but it's like, I know that's her love language, so I'm going to do it. And she knows hiking and all that, climbing mountains is my thing, so she does it with me. So it's things like that. But what really has been helpful, Rick, is sort of, I need to come up with a clever word for it, but like sort of taking advantage of time, not multitasking, though some people might say that, but it's kind of has a bad ring to it. But it's the ability to accomplish multiple things at the same time. So an example would be like kid time. How do I get time with my kids? Well, if fitness was important, so we were teaching our kids fitness. So let's triathlon. So our kids were getting into triathlon, our first 2 kids. And so that's what I would do with them. And we had all this time together. We were exercising together. We had a lot of dashboard time, right? We'd be driving places to go race and things like that. So we got our physical fitness in. We got the father-daughter, father-son bonding in, time together, all at the same time. Or like, I'm really mindful about not wasting time. And so it's like, if I'm going to read, I do it on the treadmill. So I do love to read, or if I'm going to listen to a podcast or things like that, I do while I'm running. So I'm killing two birds with one stone. And the more you can do that in your life, I think the more you accomplish. So a lot of times, yeah, people say, how do you do everything? And I'm like, dang, I've got a lot of downtime. I'm not like always like running and doing stuff. I have plenty of downtime, but I think one way is just like, how can I double things up and still be good at both? I can still walk fine while I read. I can still run fine because a lot of people say, oh, the multitasking, doesn't work 'cause you're not paying attention. No, I'm paying attention. So those are some ways that we do it and how we make things work. And we just really just prioritize, our family and make it happen.
And wonderful conversation. Clearly, there's an entire podcast we're gonna go on the NG book, and some of your life lessons, which not only professional, but when you talk about your personal life, the way you've enhanced your relationships, the applicability there is so transportable across so many different segments of an individual as they navigate their own lives, that I know you have so much more to share. But I love having you as a guest. I want you back, and great to see you, my friend.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I know your audience already knows this, but Rick, you're a great man, and you've done some great things. And I loved when we served together, and maybe someday we will again. But thank you for having me on your podcast.
Oh, we loved it. So see you again, Ed. And for all our listeners, thanks for tuning in to the Healthcare Nation podcast.
The opinions expressed by the host and guests are for informational purposes only and not associated with any companies or academic institutions. Please follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts, as well as our YouTube channel, Healthcare Nation Podcast. And if you have any questions or want to contact us, please reach out to healthcarenationpodcast.com.